Judge. The state calls Christine Schlenker.
Good. Just put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, once you get comfortable, you can state your full name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Christine Schlenker, Schlenker.
Okay, prosecutor.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Ms. Schlenker.
Good afternoon.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed with the New Jersey State Police Office of Forensic Sciences in the DNA laboratory as a Forensic Scientist 3, which is a supervisor.
How long have you been with the New Jersey State Police as a forensic scientist?
I started with New Jersey State Police in October of 2002.
I'd like to ask you about your professional and educational background. I'm going to show you in counsel what you marked as S-492. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is, it's a copy of my resume, my CV.
Okay. And how many pages is it?
It is 4 pages.
And did you create that document?
Yes, I did.
If you could, take us through your formal education.
Sure. I graduated from the University of New Haven with a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Science, also a Bachelor's of Science in Biology with a pre-med concentration, and a minor in Chemistry. I graduated from the University of Florida with a master's degree in pharmaceutical sciences with a concentration in forensic DNA and serology.
And what, if any, specific courses were you required to take to become a forensic DNA analyst?
To become a forensic DNA analyst, you have to have certain coursework, including genetics, statistics, molecular biology, and biochemistry.
Can you tell the jury about your prior professional experience as it relates to your field?
Sure. Before I started with New Jersey State Police, I did work for a private DNA lab called the Bodie Technology Group. It's located in North Virginia, and I worked there for a little over 2 years.
Where did you work after that?
After I left Bodie Technology, I came right to New Jersey State Police in October of 2002.
Can you tell us the different titles that you've had at the New Jersey State Police?
Sure. When I was hired hired as a Forensic Scientist 1, which is an entry level. After some time, I took some promotional exams. I was promoted to a Forensic Scientist 2, and then that was in 2015. And then in 2022, I was promoted to a Forensic Scientist 3, my current title.
And what is it that you do as a Forensic Scientist 3 now?
As a Forensic Scientist 3, I'm primarily tasked with managing a group of scientists, performing administrative reviews on case files, also performing technical reviews on case files. I organize or I assist various agencies in regards to cold cases and their missing person cases. I'm a liaison for that for the laboratory. And when needed, I do write up reports.
So do you still do casework, I guess?
Not in the laboratory, but I'll do anything from writing up a case to doing a technical review of a case to administrative review of the case. Kind of just depends where the need is.
Now, what, if any, continuing education are you required to receive?
Every year, we're required to have 8 hours of continuing education. That can either be where we have somebody come in and give training to us at the laboratory, or we go out to a various seminar or meeting.
And are you required to undergo proficiency testing?
Yes, twice a year.
And are you current and up to date with your proficiency testing?
Yes, I am. I believe my current lab test or current proficiency test is pending.
Now, as far as professional memberships, do you belong to any professional memberships that relate to your profession?
Yes, I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences and also the Northeastern Association of Forensic Scientists.
Does the New Jersey State Police currently utilize a software called StarMix?
Yes.
Since when?
We went online with StarMix in April of 2022.
Now, were you trained in StarMix?
Yes, I was.
What did that training entail?
We had training that involved ESR, which is the company who makes StarMix. They came into the laboratory, gave us training. We also had various in-house training. There was competency tests and also a oral board.
Now, since you were trained in StarMix, what has been your role with regard to StarMix in terms of utilizing the software?
In terms of utilizing the software, like I said, I still write reports, and I also do technical review of cases. So I'm still writing up reports, utilizing the StarMix software myself, and also reviewing it from the technical standpoint.
In total, about how many DNA samples have you processed and analyzed over the course of your career?
Easily over 30,000 samples.
Now, how many times have you testified in court with regard to the results of your analyses?
Over 50 times.
And in what jurisdictions?
Various superior courts throughout the state of New Jersey, including Essex County, Mercer County, Ocean County, and Monmouth County as well.
Now, in those instances, were you qualified as an expert in the field of forensic DNA analysis?
Yes, I was.
How many times?
Every time.
Judge, at this time, the state would seek to have this witness qualified as an expert in the field of forensic DNA analysis.
Any voir dire?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, should be accepted as an expert. You got it. Go ahead.
Now, back in July of 2023, did you have occasion to perform DNA testing and analysis with regard to certain items in the present case?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as S417 and S493.
Show me, counsel. If we could start with S493, if you could tell us if you recognize that.
Yes, S493 is a copy of the five-page report I issued on 9/29/2023.
And is there a case number, a laboratory case number on there?
Yes, it is C18-10139.
Now, S417, do you recognize that?
Yes, this is a copy of the evidence receipt for this particular case and this submission.
Is there a date on there for the submission?
Yes, it was submitted to the laboratory on June 7th, 2023.
And is there a lab number on there?
Yes, again, it's C18-10139.
What specific items were submitted to the lab?
From the evidence receipt, item number 40, from scene 1, it was a label located on the interior waistbands of jeans. 41 was from scene 1. It was a long sleeve Eddie Bauer thermal shirt. 42 was scene 1. That was a black/gray sock with gold toe and melted yellow plastic.
Okay. And just to be clear, were these submitted from the Ocean Township scene?
I believe so, yes.
Now, on your report, which is S493, if you could, specifically page 2 of your report, this item 40-1, do you see that?
Yes.
And what is that?
40-1 is a portion of the label from the jeans.
Okay. What, if any, testing was performed with regard to that?
That testing, only the first 2 steps were in our 4-step analysis was processed. After quantitation, there was no DNA detected, so therefore analysis stopped after the quant step.
Now, on page 3 of your report, do you see where it lists item 41-1-1?
Yes.
And what is that?
That is a portion of the scraping of the inside of the collar from a shirt.
And is that the shirt that you referred to, the long sleeve Eddie Bauer thermal shirt?
Yes.
Was any DNA testing performed on that?
Yes.
And then page 1 of your report, where it lists item 6-1-4-1, do you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
That is a portion of the staining from the right shin area from the jeans.
Okay. Now, was 6-1-4-1, was that a resubmission of an actual item of evidence?
No, it wasn't.
What was it then?
With that was previously analyzed by the scientists whose case this was originally. So it was requested for us to go ahead and process that sample, again, at the laboratory utilizing StarMix. So we had to perform an amplification and also another CE run or detection step. So just the last 2 steps of the 4-step process was done on that. And it's,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, I was saying it's just done on the extract, which is liquid that's left over from our analysis, and that's stored at the laboratory.
So just to be clear, the 3 items that were listed on that evidence property receipt, of those 3 items, the label of the jeans got to you,
Yes.
and the portion of the shirt scrapings inside collar, did that make its way to you?
Yes.
The sock, did that ever come to you from
No.
serology? Now, was the New Jersey State Police provided with any reference samples from the prosecutor's office for comparison purposes?
Yes, reference samples were already previously submitted and tested.
And because you utilized, as you indicated, StarMix software to assist you in your analysis in this case, I'd like to briefly discuss what StarMix is.
Okay.
So let's begin with what is it?
StarMix is a probabilistic genotyping software that we validated in the laboratory. It helps us interpret DNA profiles and also to perform a statistical calculation when we're doing comparisons to different references.
Is it particularly useful in certain samples?
Yes, if we have a sample that's a mixture of, let's say, 3 or 4 contributors, it helps us with deconvoluting or determining possible different profiles that are within that mixture.
Now, is StarMix intended to replace the DNA analyst?
No.
What is it essentially then doing?
Again, it's a tool that's utilized at the laboratory. So when we get our data after our CE run, I'm first looking at that data and evaluating it to see if it's of good quality or quantity. Same thing we did prior to StarMix with our binary methods. If I determine it's of good quality, I can determine the number of contributors, then I'm then going ahead and using StarMix and inputting that data to generate an interpretation report. That interpretation report, I'm going over as an analyst. I'm reviewing the diagnostics. I'm looking at the genotypes that were proposed, the weights that were proposed for those genotypes, and seeing if I agree with it, if it's intuitive. Like I said, it's just a tool. You can compare it to something like back in the day, if you were going from point A to point B, you would have to pull out your map out your route. Nowadays, we have GPS. You could pull up Waze, put it in Google Maps, enter that information. It's taking more information into account to plan your route. So it's taking into account an accident or congestion, stuff like that.
How long has the New Jersey State Police Lab been utilizing StarMix?
We went online with it in April of 2022.
And prior to that, did you have to, or did StarMix have to go through a rigorous validation process?
Yes.
And did you and other analysts have to be trained in utilizing StarMix?
Yes.
Can you discuss that training?
Yes. As earlier, like I said, we had the company come in, or the company gave us training from ESR. We also had internal trainings, competency tests, and also oral boards.
Now, is StarMix being utilized by other laboratories around the country?
Yes.
Do you know the approximate percentage?
I believe it's about 80% of the labs are using StarMix now in the country.
Was the New Jersey State Police, when you guys got StarMix, were you sort of late to the game?
Yes, and we started doing our validation, and then COVID happened, so we got even a little more delayed than we had intended. So,
Now, the jury has heard from forensic scientist Christopher Simkowiak about DNA and how forensic DNA analysis works. In particular, they've heard about the 4-step laboratory process, which culminates in the production of an electropharogram. Did StarMix change anything about that 4-step laboratory process?
no, nothing.
What stage of the game, essentially, does StarMix come into play at?
StarMix comes into play at the end when we're doing our interpretation.
And can you just explain how it comes into play with regard to your interpretation? In other words, does the methodology of that interpretation change?
No, we're still evaluating our data, like I said, based on whether it was before we had our binary methods and now with StarMix. We're going through, we're looking at that data, making sure it's meeting certain criteria for us to make an interpretation, make sure that we can use StarMix. We're determining the number of contributors, and then we're inputting that information into the StarMix software for the analysis.
Okay, so just so we're clear, StarMix is essentially it's a computer software, is that right?
Yes.
And it is essentially doing the same thing that the scientist would do. It's just able to do all of these calculations much faster because it's a computer, not a human being. Is that right?
Yes. It's taking into account and doing a whole lot of math that we can't do in our heads that quickly. So it's taking into account different things like stutter and degradation that we were unable to do with our binary methods.
Now, is the likelihood ratio that, let me ask you, what is the likelihood ratio? What is the statistic that StarMix utilizes?
StarMix utilizes a likelihood ratio.
Is the likelihood ratio statistic itself something new?
No, it's been used for so many years in forensics, and even with the state police, we've used likelihood ratio easily about over 10, 15 years now.
So the jury has heard about the random match probability statistic. Can you explain the likelihood ratio statistic?
Sure. A likelihood ratio is two competing hypotheses to give explanation or provide explanation of your data. In its simplest form, you can have one hypothesis that person A is the contributor. In your second hypothesis, it's that an unknown person is the contributor. If your likelihood ratio is greater than 1, it's supporting your first hypothesis. If it's less than 1, it's supporting your second hypothesis.
Now, are there scenarios where your lab will still use the random match probability statistic?
Yes.
What are those scenarios?
If we have a robust single source profile, we will then go ahead and use the random match probability. Also, if we utilize StarMix and a profile is deconvoluted or determined, we're able to then go ahead and perform a random match probability statistic if it meets certain criteria.
Turning to the present case, if you could, I'd like you to take a look at
S493, which is your report, and starting with item 6-1-4-1. Can you just, again, tell us what that is?
That is a portion of the staining on the front right shin area of jeans.
Now, when was the original DNA analysis of this particular area conducted?
It was sometime in 2018.
When you reanalyzed this area using StarMix, did you first familiarize yourself with the original DNA analyst's reports?
Yes.
And what about his notes?
I did go ahead and look at the report and also the data that was generated back in 2018.
And what were the original results for sample 6-1-4-1 from the genes?
At that time, no conclusions could be reached.
Okay, and that was because why?
Just because it didn't meet the criteria at that time for our protocols and with our binary methods that we had.
So generally speaking, what did the retesting that you did entail?
Because of our validation, we have certain equipment in the laboratory. Any sample that was amplified prior to May of 2019 has to be brought back in and re-amplified using our current equipment. Otherwise, it'd be a violation of our validation and protocols. So when we agreed to, or when I looked at it and evaluated it to go ahead and process it again at the laboratory and to run StarMix on it, I took that extract out that was stored at the laboratory and it was amplified and also run on the CE, the 3500.
Okay, so was a new electropharogram produced from that?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically, what, if anything, did you do with that electropharogram in terms of visually observing it?
I then looked at that data to determine if it was of good quality, if anything needed to be done, any additional lab work. I looked to see if I could determine the number of contributors. Once I was done with it, then I was brought it and imported everything into StarMix to do my comparison and my analysis.
What was the number of contributors that you decided?
For 6-1-4-1, it was a DNA profile best described as 2 contributors, all of which are suitable for comparison.
Once you determined the number of contributors, what was the next thing that you did with the electropharogram and the number of contributors?
Once I determined the number of contributors and ran it through StarMix, I was then going through the interpretation report that was generated from StarMix. Again, looking at the different diagnostics, looking at the proposed genotypes for different locations, for the different contributors, looking at the weights and just evaluating the overall data.
Now, did you perform or conduct any comparisons?
Yes.
And can you tell us about those?
Yes. So when I ran it through StarMix. Like I said it was best described as 2 contributors, all of which are suitable for comparison. Contributor number 1 was unknown male A. And then with that, I did comparisons to the different reference samples I had.
Now, what, if anything, did you note about contributor 1?
The conclusion for contributor 1, or just that it's an unknown male A?
Sure. So what, if any, conclusions, I guess I'll ask it that way. What, if any, conclusions did you make for contributor 1?
So when I went through and I did the comparisons, comparing it to Jesse Caneiro, Jesse Caneiro is identified as a source of the STR DNA profile of unknown male A.
Now, was a statistic reached for Jesse Caneiro?
Yes, it either met or exceeded our source attribution threshold, which is 1 in 8 trillion. And that statistic was generated, and it's in part of my case file.
If I showed you that part of your case file, could you give us the specific statistic?
Sure.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as S494. I'm showing council. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the statistic I generated for 6-1-4-1C1, contributor 1, compared to Jesse Caneiro, C18-10138, number 2. Again, I recognize it because it has our laboratory number for this case, C18-10139, and also my signature at the top.
Okay. And even though Jesse Caneiro reached source attribution, what, if you could tell us what the statistic was for that?
Sure. The actual statistic calculated was 1 in 2.73 septillion.
Thank you. Now, what, if any, other comparisons were made with regard to that sample and the other the reference samples that you had?
Comparison to Paul Caneiro, H1, which was hypothesis 1. Paul Caneiro and 1 unknown individual are the contributors, and hypothesis 2, H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. The DNA profile is approximately 53 billion times more likely to occur if H2 is true rather than if H1 is true. Therefore, there is very strong support that Paul Caneiro is not a contributor to the mixture.
Okay. And how about the next comparison that you made?
Sorry, one quick thing.
Sure.
The New Jersey State Police, when we issue our likelihood ratios, we actually report out the unified likelihood ratio that's generated in our StarMix reports. So the unified is actually taking into account unrelated individuals and related individuals, and that's what's reported out in our case files.
Thank you. All right. Now, what is the next comparison that you made?
Comparison to Jennifer Caneiro. H1, Jennifer Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. Or H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. Assuming 2 contributors, a likelihood ratio of 0 was calculated, which excludes Jennifer Caneiro as a possible contributor to the mixture.
Okay. And did you make any other comparisons?
Yes. Comparison to Sophia Caneiro. H1, Sophia Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. Or H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. A likelihood ratio of 1.0 in favor of H2 was calculated, which falls within the laboratory's uninformative range. Therefore, no conclusions will be reached concerning Sophia Caneiro as a contributor to the mixture.
And just so we're clear, when we're talking about these comparisons, are you comparing it to the second person in the mixture?
We're comparing it to the mixture itself.
Okay. And what was the next comparison that you did after that?
Comparison to Keith Caneiro. Keith Caneiro and 1 unknown individual are the contributors, and H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. The DNA profile is approximately 440,000 times more likely to occur if H2 is true rather than if H1 is true. Therefore, there is strong support that Keith Caneiro is not a contributor to the mixture.
And what's the final comparison that you made?
A comparison to Sean Edson. H1 is Sean Edson and 1 unknown individual are the contributor. H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. Assuming 2 contributors, a likelihood ratio of 0 was calculated, which excludes Sean Edson as a possible contributor to the mixture.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to refer you to the other sample that you performed DNA testing on in your report, specifically 41-1-1. Can you just remind us, what is that?
That is a portion of the scraping of the inside of collar of a shirt.
And what, if anything, did you do with regard to generating a DNA profile from this sample?
This sample underwent a 4-step process in the laboratory. Again, an electrophoregram was generated at the end of that 4-step process, which I evaluated, looked to see if it's good quality, if it's sufficient for star mix, also determined number of contributors.
Was it sufficient for star mix?
Yes.
And did you run it through star mix?
Yes, I did.
What, if any, comparisons did you make?
Again, I compared it to all of the references that were submitted.
And can you tell us the conclusions of those comparisons?
Sure. First, the SCR DNA profile is best described as 2 contributors, all of which are suitable for comparison. Comparison to Paul Caneiro. H1, Paul Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors, and H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. The DNA profile is approximately 110 million times more likely to occur if H1 is true rather than if H2 is true. Therefore, there is very strong support that Paul Caneiro is a contributor to the mixture.
And just to be clear, are we talking about the collar scrapings that you described earlier from the shirt 4111?
Yes.
What other comparisons did you make in this case?
Comparison to Jennifer Caneiro. H1, Jennifer Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. The DNA profile is approximately 24,000 times more likely to occur if H2 is true rather than if H1 is true. Therefore, there is strong support that Jennifer Caneiro is not a contributor to the mixture.
What was the next comparison that was done with regard to the sample?
Comparison to Jesse Caneiro. Jesse Caneiro and 1 unknown individual are the contributors, or H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. The DNA profile is approximately 400 million times more likely to occur if H2 is true rather than if H1 is true. Therefore, there is very strong support that Jesse Caneiro is not a contributor to the mixture.
And what was the next comparison you made?
Comparison to Sophia Caneiro. H1, Sophia Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. A likelihood ratio of 77 in favor of H1 was calculated, which falls within the laboratory's uninformative range. Therefore, no conclusions will be reached concerning Sophia Caneiro as a contributor to the mixture.
How about the next one?
Comparison to Keith Caneiro. H1, Keith Caneiro, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. Assuming 2 contributors, a likelihood ratio of 0 was calculated, which excludes Keith Caneiro as a possible contributor to the mixture.
And what was the final comparison that was done with regard to the sample?
There was a comparison to Sean Edson. H1, Sean Edson, and 1 unknown individual are the contributors. H2, 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. Assuming 2 contributors, a likelihood ratio of 0 was calculated, which excludes Sean Edson as a possible contributor to the mixture.
You mentioned the uninformative range. Can you just explain what that is?
Yes. We have the verbal scale of the laboratory. It's issued on the reports. It's on page 5 of my report. That's just a verbal qualifier for the statistic. If the likelihood ratio falls in between 1 and 999, that is our uninformative range in the laboratory, and therefore we can't make conclusions.
I'm heading further.
Cross.
I heard you say something and I didn't quite understand it, so I just wanted to make sure that I had it right. You said that the state police lab, when you were talking about the likelihood ratio, and you wanted to bring up a point, and you said our lab does a unified LR. It takes into consideration both related and unrelated individuals?
Yes.
Okay. What did you mean by that?
So likelihood ratios, when we used to do it prior, using our mathematical spreadsheet that we had, our worksheet, our likelihood ratios were previously based on unrelated individuals. So as part of our conclusions, we'd always state and make sure that unrelated individuals was in our conclusions. Now with StarMix, it generates the unrelated, but then it also calculates the various relationship likelihood ratios. All that is taken into account for the unified likelihood ratio. So therefore, the unified likelihood ratio is what we report, which includes related and unrelated individuals.
I got you. And you said the state police does that,
Yes.
and you're saying, obviously, that's where you're employed currently.
Yes.
And you're not. That's a function that's part of the star mix testing that the state police does, right?
I believe StarMix calculates the relationship no matter what, but I think it's up to the individual laboratory if they want to report out the unrelated or unified.
Gotcha. Okay. So StarMix, like you said, it is a computer program. It's software that assists you in DNA interpretation.
Yes.
It isn't like a DNA test itself, right?
Correct. It's not lab work or anything like that. It's based on the data that's generated from that 4-step process.
It doesn't swab things. It doesn't take samples. It doesn't extract DNA, right?
No.
And it doesn't amplify the DNA.
No.
It doesn't. Basically, after the lab has done things to extract and amplify DNA, that sample could be suitable for submission to StarMix.
Correct.
Okay. Now, StarMix doesn't actually observe biological material, right? It doesn't look at cells or blood or saliva or things like that.
No, it's looking at the DNA profile that's generated from the lab work.
Right. So what it's really looking at is numerical data.
It's looking at all the data that's generated, yes. The allele peak heights, stutter, yes, all that.
And all those things are, in some fashion, input into it, so it's able to look at that, right?
Yes, so the data, like I said, once it's done in the electrophoregram, we get that data straight from the CE run, and that data is inputted in based on the biological results.
Now, obvious to say, but just so it's on the record here, StarMix in and of itself, it doesn't determine it. It doesn't do anything to determine how DNA was deposited on an item, right?
Correct.
And it can't tell you how long DNA's been on an item, right?
Correct.
It can't tell you why or who deposited it initially, right?
Correct.
What it does essentially is compare hypotheses about a contributor versus a hypothesis about an unknown or unknown contributors, and tries to determine the likelihood of either being greater.
Correct. The likelihood of either hypothesis.
Now, is primarily used for complex DNA samples. Would that be fair to say?
It's used for all samples at the laboratory, even some single source samples.
Right. I mean, now it is. So
Yes.
it's. I think it's becoming probably routine for state police lab to use it, even if it's not a complex mixture. Right.
It's always been like that, yes.
Okay. Now, it relies on probability theory to output the results that it gives you, right?
Correct. We're putting in the number of contributors, we're doing the comparisons to different references, and it's comparing those two hypotheses.
Right. And obviously the two hypotheses or the propositions, one proposition that you're inputting to it is typically going to include a proposition that the person of interest is included in the sample, right?
Yes, when we're doing our comparison, like I said, we're comparing based on the profile. Is the comparison that's person part of the mixture or a contributor or an unknown?
Mm-hmm. And the likelihood ratio is a comparison of those competing hypotheses. It's not a conclusion about a person being a contributor to the mixture.
Well, the likelihood ratio will support inclusion or exclusion, and you get that numerical value, and then we have that verbal qualifier.
Right. So the verbal qualifier is some support for a proposition, strong support, very strong support for the proposition.
Yes.
That's the verbal scale you're talking about, right?
Yes.
When it came to Jesse, for example, you were able to do source attribution regarding that 6-1 item that you've attributed that sample was contributed by Jesse Caneiro, right?
Yes.
And that was, you didn't, it exceeded the threshold for which you can do source attribution, but the prosecutor asked you what the statistic would have been, or what it was calculated as, and it was in excess of a septillion.
Correct.
Right? And so a septillion, I think I did this right, is like 27 zeros.
I think it's 24 zeros.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, let's call it 24. And then, but for Paul, on that 41-1, the likelihood ratio you got there was 110 million, right?
That is, yes, so it's a likelihood, I believe that was the statistic. It's a likelihood ratio compared to a random match probability. So the likelihood ratio, I believe, was in support of H1.
Right. The hypothesis H1 was 110 million times more likely than H2.
In support of, yeah.
Right. And 110 million or 100 million has 8 zeros.
Correct.
Okay. So the software and the verbal scale is going to say the same thing about both of those numbers. The verbal scale is going to say a number with 24 zeros after it provides very strong support for a proposition, right?
Actually, no, the verbal scale is only for the likelihood ratios,
Well,
not for the random match probability, which is a completely different statistic.
well, is there something stronger than very strong support in the verbal scale?
Again, the verbal scale isn't meant for any of our random match probabilities. That verbal scale didn't start with our reports until we went online with StarMix.
Sure.
And we've been reporting out source attribution and random match probabilities for a long time.
Right. I'm just saying that the verbal scale goes, it looks to me like it goes from 0, which is exclusion, right, to 1 million or greater, which is very strong support,
Yes.
right? And there's nothing on the verbal scale, there's nothing that comes after very strong support, right?
Correct.
And so after 1 million or greater, the verbal scale kind of just tops out there. Anything over 1 million, it can go to infinity. There's nothing stronger in the verbal scale than very strong support, right?
Again, that's for the likelihood ratio, yes.
Yeah, right. But, obviously the statistic you can generate in terms of these matches goes well in excess of that 1 million or greater in the verbal qualifier scheme, right?
Yes, our random match probability can go higher than 1 million. And again, that likelihood ratio verbal qualifier is for our likelihood ratios.
Right. But that number that's generated in terms of the statistic, it could be in the millions, but it could be in billions, right?
For a likelihood ratio or a random match?
For a likelihood ratio.
Yes.
Or it could be in the trillions, right?
I guess.
Now, okay, so the analyst, such as yourself, would have to decide certain things about what to tell StarMix in terms of the contributors to the mixture, right?
Yes, we have to determine the number of contributors.
If you take a look at the evidence and you think it's 2, you're going to put 2, right?
Yes.
If you think it could be 3, you're going to put 3, right?
Correct.
Now, the more contributors you have, the more complex the sample becomes, right?
Not necessarily.
If you believe that there's 3 contributors, the way that 3 people could contribute to a mixture is more varied than the way that two people can contribute to a mixture.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, that's a fact, right?
Well, yeah, it would depend on who's a major, who's a minor. Everybody's contributing the same amount.
Right, but you don't know any of those things prior to doing the testing, right? And the sample, there's no rules that come with the sample that say that the minor contributor has to contribute a certain amount, and the major contributor has to contribute a certain amount. The sample just is what the sample is, right?
Correct.
And sometimes we see that obviously there can be allele sharing amongst parents, right? A child can get an allele at a location from the same one from both parents, right?
Yes.
And that's a situation where if we just look at that in the abstract, we're going to see one allele at a location, but it's actually because it was contributed the same way by both parents. Could be, right?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. I don't think that was very clear. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So the thing is that certain determinations that need to be made by the analyst, one of them being how many contributors. And does the analyst also determine which peaks potentially are included for a star mix's consideration?
What do you mean by which peaks?
Well, like in a traditional like electropharogram, right? There's peaks within that. Some of them might meet the lab's protocols for consideration. Some might not.
Oh, no, the whole profile in and of itself just gets uploaded into the software.
And the software can determine if something is below the analytical threshold for the laboratory.
If it's below the analytical threshold, it's not on the electropharogram. It's not called at all.
Okay, so it's not in there. Okay, I got you. Now, two analysts, right, I suppose it's possible, might come to a different conclusion about something such as the number of contributors.
Correct.
And one analyst might think there were two, but another could think there were three, maybe simple, right?
Correct.
Now, if analyst number one thinks it's two, and they input that information into StarMix, they're going to get a different result than the analyst who input the three-person mixture hypothesis into StarMix, right?
I guess it depends on the mixture in itself. If there's still like a clear major, most likely that major will still get called as it is. The minors might get called differently because StarMix will be trying to put in more people in a three-person mixture than a two-person mixture.
Mm-hmm. Right. But the various ways that StarMix might interpret a three-person versus a two-person mixture, we couldn't really say because we're not really able to do all the computations that StarMix does, right?
I mean, it can be done by people, but no. I mean, it's too much calculations for us to do ourselves. So, yeah, the software does that.
Like it has to consider too many possibilities. It considers more possibilities than we can really practically consider, right?
Yes, when you start adding your contributors, again, if you have 3 contributors versus 2, it's going to take into account more various possibilities based on the data that's there.
Right. Because you were saying, kind of comparing it to GPS. You used to look at the map, now you look at the GPS,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Now, there might be like 3 ways for you to get to this courthouse, say, right?
Mm-hmm.
But StarMix is not, it's not really the difference between a map and a GPS in the sense of the number of possibilities it considers, because StarMix can consider millions of possibilities.
Yes, it goes through and it evaluates the data, comes up with most possible or possible genotypes, and starts giving weights to those genotypes for those different contributors.
Right. And StarMix, you can look at what it produces, right? And you can see if after that output you believe it makes sense, right?
Correct.
But StarMix makes determinations within that software. StarMix makes determinations about who is a major and a minor within a sample, right?
Yes.
And StarMix can also, in terms of the reports it produces, it does component interpretation, right, for major and minor contributors?
For like C1 and C2, contributor 1, contributor 2, yes.
Yes. And it actually, within that it creates, star mix could state within that component interpretation that there's several possibilities for a given locus and how the major contributor contributed, but it might weight those differently, right?
Yes, it's various allele or proposed genotypes from the analysis and given a weight for that.
Okay. And star mix, in terms of a major contributor, might typically choose in a given allele the interpretation that it's weighted most heavily, right?
Some of them, yes, can get weighted heavily, yes.
But star mix doesn't automatically choose the allele combination that it weights the most heavily, right?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, so let's say at, I don't know, at the location D13, S317, star mix sees an 1112 and weights that as 97.34%, right?
Okay.
Now, I would imagine that's a situation where it's very likely the star mix is going to say it believes that those are likely to be the alleles that were contributed by the major at that location.
Based on the data and based on the analysis, yes, it came up with that weight of 97-something%.
Right. But star mix isn't always able to weight things that heavily, right?
Correct.
And sometimes the best star mix can do at a given locus, it could be 20%, it could be 15%, right?
Again, it would depend on the data, and if you're starting to look at those minor contributors, because there might be dropout happening, or there might be allele stacking.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the things that star mix is good at, though, and the reason why it's used is because it can consider all those possibilities simultaneously.
Yes.
And it keeps it all in its mind, so to speak, at the same time, right? And that's the thing that a human being can't do, right?
I definitely can keep all that in my mind.
Well, it's for computers,
Yes.
right? And a computer is needed to keep that much data information in consideration at the same moment, right?
Correct.
So in terms of the results that it outputs results, and you can check it against your interpretation of things, but we can't really check its work. We can't really ask the software, why did you produce the results that you produced, right?
Meaning, why did we produce why are those the assigned weights? Or?
Why are they decided? Why did you make a choice about who assigning a certain allele to a major versus a minor contributor, things of that nature?
Well, again, some of that is intuitive as an analyst looking at that data and then looking at the star mix report.
Sure, but you can't have a conversation with the software about why it's doing what it's doing.
No.
And I think it's important to distinguish perhaps that what we're talking about is not like an AI program, right?
Correct.
It's just a traditional software program, and it's not a language model. It doesn't have there is no back and forth kind of iteration or conversation between you and the program, right?
Correct. It's all based on mathematical calculations.
Right. Now, obviously, because of that, star mix depends on its working appropriately depends on it being set up correctly, right?
Yes.
And it depends on the user understanding how the software operates, right?
Yes, having some knowledge of that, yes.
And it's going to be the most effective when the assumptions about an item of evidence that are input into it are correct, right?
Yes.
If incorrect assumptions are used, then the output that it gives could be misleading, right?
If the input is incorrect, meaning like an artifact is left in, or I mean, yes, that could
Right.
affect the data.
Or number of contributors, right?
Yes, if number of contributors, if you're running it and there are diagnostics that you can look at to go back and reevaluate your data.
You know, you mentioned the thing about StarMex having this unified, you can do this unified look at it where you're considering both relatedness and unrelated individuals.
Yes.
Right? But as a general proposition, would you agree that related individuals obviously share more of their DNA with one another than unrelated individuals do, right?
It depends on the relationship between individuals in a family, but yes, but there's plenty of times where strangers share the same amount of similar, or the same alleles, rather.
Okay. Yeah, that's a, we should talk about that. It's not as if, when we're looking at these locations, right, where the genetic testing matters, and we're looking at the alleles along those 23 or so locations, right? First of all, we're doing that because those are the areas where it's been determined that there's a high amount of differentiation among individuals, right?
Correct.
At high enough that with the right amount of data, we can basically determine whether somebody is potentially the source of biological material left unentitled, right?
Correct.
But even though that's the case, we would anticipate that unrelated people, strangers, even amongst those alleles that we look to for differentiation, strangers over those 23 locations are going to share a certain amount of data with one another, right?
It's completely random that they might have the same allele or not. Yep.
And do you have any idea, or do you have a thought about how much the average person is likely to share in terms of those 23 alleles with the stranger?
No, and it depends on the people. It can vary from person to person, just depends on your profile.
Sure. I mean, on an individual case, but I'm just saying in terms of people in general. No. Okay. Obviously, when we're talking about siblings, we're going to assume or imagine that siblings are going to share more of their data, their DNA, than just unrelated strangers, right?
Yes, siblings in theory should share 25%, meaning they have the same profile or same alleles at those locations. About 50% of the time, they might share just one allele with their sibling. And the other 25% of the time, they're different than their sibling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, would it be fair to say that on average, we would anticipate that siblings who have the same parent, both same biological parents, would share about 50% of their DNA with each other?
Yeah, I guess it's fair to say whether it's an exact share or half of it, yes.
Obviously, that can vary, right? Siblings could be full siblings and share less than 50% of their DNA, right?
Yes.
And siblings can be full siblings and share more than 50% of their DNA.
Yes.
But because you get half your DNA from your mother and half your DNA from your father, right? It's reasonable to say that in general, 50% would be the average relatedness between siblings.
I think based on, like I said, that 25, you would expect about 25% of the time it's an exact match, meaning both alleles match it for each sibling. Mm-hmm. And about 50% of the time you would have about one allele matching at all those locations between siblings.
But siblings could be more, they could share more alleles than just 50% of the tested alleles, right?
Yes, they can share a lot or not share as much as you would expect, yes.
And identical twins share 100%?
Identical twins have the same STR profile.
So anywhere you tested an identical twin, they're going to look the same in terms of the profile as their twin. right?
Yes.
But siblings who are not identical twins, well, by the way, did you happen to see, or how many of the tested alleles, in this case, there are where Paul Caneiro matches Keith Caneiro?
No.
You did. And if I told you it was about 70%, would that be a surprising number or unsurprising?
No.
No.
I mean, like we just said, they can share more sometimes with siblings or not share at all.
Mhm.
Or not share that much, I should say.
Right. Obviously, 70% would be a significant amount more than 50%, right?
It's larger, yeah.
And obviously, 70%, though, is a level of overlap that you wouldn't expect to see between unrelated individuals, right?
I think that's fair, yeah.
And, you know, siblings can commonly differ at several loci, if not many loci, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that seeing an overlap at 21 out of 23 loci reflects a strong genetic relationship between two individuals?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. An overlap in terms of the same alleles being present at 21 out of 23 loci, right?
Like fully the same exact alleles, like 11, 12, 11, 12? Or do you mean like 11, 12, 11, 11? And the 11 is overlapping?
The second.
The second? No. I mean, if you, again, as siblings, you can share that much information.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, 25% of the time estimated, you share exact, so 11, 12, 11, 12. About 50% of the time, you share that one allele, an 11, 12, or an 11, 11.
Right.
But there are differences even at those locations where they share one allele.
Sure. Obviously, the overlap, it doesn't mean that the profiles are going to look identical or be indistinguishable, right? You know, that's not meant to suggest that. But obviously, the degree of overlap is something that you'd expect to see far more often among siblings than unrelated people, right?
I would expect it, yeah.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a break now. I'm watching everybody. It's time. If we can just move we're going to take our mid-afternoon break. We'll start back up at 10 minutes after 3. All right. Mr. Murray, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So, ma'am, we had been talking before about item 41-1-1. There's the shirt collar, right?
The scraping.
And the scraping, and that's the one where the hypothesis H1 was more likely than H2, right?
In which comparison?
In 41-1-1, where you said the DNA profile is 110 million times more likely to occur if H1 is true rather than H2.
But there are multiple likelihood ratios and comparisons made, so
Right.
which comparison, which reference sample?
That was the reference sample, Paul Caneiro versus Paul Caneiro, one unknown individual versus two unknown individuals.
Yes.
Okay. And then there's an interpretation report that StarMix generated regarding that testing. Is that right?
Yes, every StarMix run generates an interpretation report.
Okay, so that interpretation report is actually, who creates that? Do you create that or does StarMix create that?
That is created by StarMix.
Okay, so the contributor degradation curves, those graphs are created by StarMix?
Yes, based on the data.
And then anything about stutter variance or back stutter, that's all created by StarMix, right?
Yes.
You don't have input into the generation of those reports, right?
Yes, again, it's created by StarMix based on the mathematical calculations
Sure. The summary of likelihood ratios, that's created by StarMex.
Yes.
And the per locus likelihood ratio report, that's created by StarMex,
Yes.
right?
That's all calculated by StarMex.
The component interpretation in terms of contributor 1 and contributor 2, that's all created by StarMex.
Yes.
The weight attributed to each one is created by StarMex.
Yes.
The component that it finds greater than or equal to 99% at each locus, if it finds that, is created by StarMex.
Yes. All the weights assigned to those genotypes. Yes.
The component interpretation summary, where it analyzes contributor 1 versus contributor 2, that's created by StarMex.
I'm sorry. What is it?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
This is I marked this as G132. I don't know. Maybe there's I'm going to approach guys with 132.
Okay.
Maybe there's a different name for this. I was referring to this.
Yes. So there's just a summary of what was done or what was compiled previously. If it was able to determine the genotype at that location, it's noted there.
Okay.
And if not, it gets noted as F if it's unknown.
Okay. And that also is created by StarMex?
Yes.
Then there's a section of this report, page 10 and 11, evidence input files. And also we see that there's, the report references reference samples that the program considered, right?
Yes, and that's, again, all based on the data. So the input file is based on the electropherogram, that data from the CE run, that gets uploaded into into StarMex. And then also any reference samples that are compared, that's on the summary as well.
Sure. But all this output, this 15-page report, the things that are generated within the report, all of this is generated by StarMex itself, right?
Yes, that report is generated by StarMex.
And StarMex, based on the information it receives, it engages in modeling and statistical interpretation. It comes up with the results that it provides for a given sample of evidence, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about 41-1-1, what we know about that is the assumption that was provided to StarMex was that there were 2 contributors to the mixture, right?
Correct.
And when you're the one obviously who made that assumption for StarMex, right?
Yes, based on the data, I felt it was best explained as a mixture of 2 contributors.
When you made that determination, you were aware that the reference samples that you had for Jennifer Caneiro, Sophia Caneiro, Jesse Caneiro, Keith Caneiro, and for Paul Caneiro, you knew that these reference samples related to individuals who were amongst themselves related to one another, right?
Yes.
And you said that the testing is able to consider both related and unrelated individuals in outputting a statistic, right?
Yes, we report out the unified likelihood ratio.
But you can only put together a likelihood ratio based on propositions regarding the presence of people for whom you're able to test, right? If you don't have my profile, you're never going to be able to generate a likelihood ratio to say whether or not I'm a contributor to a mixture, right?
Correct.
Without my profile, you can't make any statements about the likelihood of my contributing or not contributing, right?
Correct. There is that unrelated statistic, but again, we would need your reference sample to see if you're supported inclusion or supported exclusion.
Right. Now, are you aware that Paul Caneiro and Keith Caneiro have another brother.
Objection. What is the relevance to this?
I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
If there's another brother, right, a full sibling, Paul and Keith, whose DNA sample is not included in the testing, right? You're not able to make any statements about whether that person would be an inclusion or an exclusion at any of these on any of these tested items, right?
Well, in the STARMIX report, there is a sibling likelihood ratio that's estimated that if it was a full sibling, but again, you would still need the reference sample to compare.
Right. Without the reference sample, nothing can be said about the hypothesis regarding likelihood of contribution, right?
Well, the likelihood, like I said, is there for a sibling, theoretically, but again, we would need that reference sample to do the comparison.
Right. And if, would you agree with me that regarding the component interpretation that STARMIX did on 41-1-1, that was what I just showed you before, that it believes that there's, as to contributor 1, that contributor 1 only has alleles that from which data can be interpreted at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations?
I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
if there's numbers at 5 locations, then yes.
Okay. And would you agree with me that Paul, in terms of these testable locations in the reference files for Paul and Keith, that Paul matches Keith in a much larger percentage of these locations than he might appear or his alleles might appear in this component interpretation?
I'm sorry, are you talking about the profile compared from Paul to Keith?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
they share, I think you said earlier about 70%, whether
Right.
it's one allele that they share or the same 2 alleles they share?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then what's your question?
My question is, I guess, that Paul shares more alleles, without a doubt, than with Keith, than we see alleles present that correspond with Paul on this item 41-1-1.
Yes, 41-1-1 was a partial profile, so it was already only half the locations, if that, we got results at.
Okay, I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Redirect.
Just quickly, one question. On item 41-1-1, where you have a likelihood ratio supporting inclusion for Paul Caneiro,
Yes.
you were able to exclude his brother Keith Caneiro from there?
Yes, Keith was excluded. Thank you.
Any further?
Anything else?
Just to clarify, Keith was excluded in this particular instance based on the STARMIX's interpretation, right?
Keith was excluded from the mixture, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure that answered the question, though. So that we all understand, he asked you if it was excluded because of STARMIX, and you just said he was excluded from it. Is it from STARMIX or is it from your own interpretation?
Yes, sorry, Your Honor, it is from STARMIX. A likelihood ratio of 0 was calculated, which is an exclusion.
Okay. If anybody has a follow-up based upon that, I just want to make sure that I understood what the answer was for the jurors.
Nothing from the state judge.
Okay. You can step down. Thank you.
Thank you.